car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. We appreciate you spending your Sunday evening with us. An interesting conversation tonight on immigration. We have an immigration expert and would love to have you join the conversation. If there are some questions you've always wanted to ask, things you've always wanted to know, now's the time to find out. You can call, text, email. That information, how to do that, is going to be at the bottom of the screen all throughout the program tonight. Leading our conversation, as he often does, Josh Wright of the firm Hollis Wright. I don't think we've ever done a show on this, have we?
After many shows, we have never done an immigration show. And I'm super excited because we have one of the most dynamic immigration attorneys in the state on today to talk about this topic. You know, and it's an interesting topic because it implicates so many issues of residency and citizenship and immigration and deportation. And so we're going to be talking about a lot of those issues today and how the law kind of weaves through that whole process. And this area of immigration law, when you're talking about it, you go to somebody that's an expert. And Dagmar Rick, who is just a great member of our bar and a member here in the Birmingham bar community, is perfect. Recently back from Germany.
Correct.
And welcome to the show. Glad you're on,
you.
And glad you're going to be able to talk with us a little bit about this.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
So let's. I get a smile on my face when I talk to you because I love your accent so much, and I could listen all day long. But I'm going to try and ask questions in the process. Let's start with this. Explain to the viewers, just kind of in general terms, immigration law, kind of what it is, and some of the stuff that you see.
The immigration code is more complicated than the code of the IRS, which tells you already how complicated it is. Yeah. And even when people want to do it right, they don't know how to do it and how much is involved. And I just sent off 2 applications for adjustment of status. These people married a U.S. citizen. Each application had about 300 pages.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, what do you see, like in your practice? What topics and issues are you dealing with primarily when people come to talk to you from an immigration perspective? Because the topic of immigration can relate to deportation, to U.S. citizenship. I mean, it's very broad. What do you see the most in your practice?
Most of my practice, a lot of people are coming, they married a U.S. citizen and they want to adjust their status. And the problem with this is that we have people who at one point entered legally the United States and then overstayed their visa and they are out of status. But when they marry a U.S. citizen, they still can apply for their green card. But when people just walked over into the United States and then marry a U.S. citizen, if they don't fall under the amnesty which expired in 2001 on April 30th, they cannot be legalized. For immigration purposes, this spouse can be deported, and it's not a hardship, at least not for immigration purposes.
Interesting.
Can I ask, you probably think we all have accents. I think folks listening notice a different dialect with which you speak. Tell us, what is your story? Where you're from Germany?
I'm from Germany. I'm actually from Munich.
Munich?
Yes, it's my hometown, and I just visited there.
Right.
And what I saw, what is going on over there with all the asylum seekers from Syria, Iraq, and
it's all over the news.
Yeah, it's terrible. The little village where I went to school, the village has about 20,000 to 30,000 people. Right. They take in every day 2,000 refugees.
Goodness.
They come by train, walk over.
That's amazing. Now what was it? How did you end up in Birmingham, Alabama?
Well, recruited my husband.
Really? So how long have you been here?
31 years.
Have you really?
Yeah. And he was a professor at medical school and is now retired.
Right.
Sent his wife to work.
Yeah.
Love it. That's great. That's good. All right, so we hear in Alabama a lot about individuals that are classified under the law as illegals. Are those the type of people sometimes that you're dealing with that are trying to get citizenship or trying to get a work visa to be able to stay here?
Well, if somebody is illegally in the United States for a certain period of time, they cannot get a work visa. This is out of the question. So really the only way into legality is if they marry somebody, or if they look for asylum, that in their country happened something, or like we just had a few months ago, declared Yemen for temporary protective status. So these people who came as visitors from Yemen don't have to go back right now. They can stay they can put in an application and they would be allowed to stay for about 2 years. And then depending on the situation, whether they have to go back after those 2 years or it will be prolonged from the State Department. That is then,
Let's assume there's somebody sitting on their couch watching the show now and they came illegally to Alabama and they worked, they're not getting married, there's no asylum issue. Do they have the ability to go back to their country and then come legally in some format to try and gain citizenship?
Well, this is what you always hear, go back and get in line. First of all, there's no line, we have no visas available. Secondly, if you are illegally or out of status in the United States for more than 1 year, you have to stay outside the United States for the next 10 years. So this is when we tell people go back, who wants to leave their children who are now maybe 8 years old and then take 10 years, so by that time they will be 18 years, not to be able to visit or to have any contact with them in the United States.
Yeah, and let's kind of go into that a little bit. If somebody was illegal, let's say they married a U.S. citizen, but they were illegally here, can they gain citizenship?
Well, that depends. Don't mix up citizenship with a green card or legal permanent residency. First, you have to be a legal permanent resident before you ever can become a citizen of the United States. So, and then it depends whether they originally entered the country legally. That means they're inspected at one time by an immigration officer and got a stamp in the passport, or whether they just walked over. And the first group, yes, you can achieve legal status if you have no criminal issues, of course.
Right.
And but the second group who just walked over, let's say they walked over in 2003, it's almost impossible. There are a few things, you would have to check into, but in general.
What are the cases that make their way to you? What is it that you see the most, and how are you most able to help folks caught in some sort of an immigration issue? I would think that's what makes it to your doorstep.
I mean, I see, of course, a lot of cases where there are complications. They got a letter from immigration, they refused something, or they want to bring somebody into the United States. Let's say they have married a spouse and the spouse is outside the United States, and then you want to get your spouse into the United States, which takes about, if you are a U.S. citizen, it takes about 2 years almost to get your spouse legally into the United States. Or people come and met somebody while either being in the military somewhere or visiting a foreign country, met somebody, have a fiancé outside the United States and want to bring the fiancé into the United States to join them and then get married. Or people, I have also people to come for the DACA, which are the youth who came into the United States before they turned 16. So as children, many of them came when they were 2 years old. So for all purposes, really, they are U.S. citizens more than foreigners.
Yeah.
When we come back from break, because I know we're about to go to break, I want to talk about some misconceptions. Offline, Dagmar was mentioning to me some things that I was really surprised by. Some of the misconceptions that you just would expect aren't the way they are, but they are. And so I want to talk about some of that stuff when we get back.
All right, let's step aside for our first break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder how you can get in touch with us. Call, text, email. Also find the firm of Hollis Wright If you'll search them on Facebook and on Twitter, it's Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis Wright. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13. Now we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never need legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of this show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to this show or related to other specific legal matters, call, email, or text us to talk with one of our lawyers. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to learn about important legal news that could affect you or your family member. Or simply contact us by going to WVTM13.com and click on the Attorneys link. Now we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and for watching The Attorneys right here on WVTM 13.
Really fascinating topic tonight, discussing immigration. Would love to have you be a part of this conversation. Call, text, email to get your questions into us, and we'll be sure and pass those along to our panel of experts. Josh?
Before we started the show, you had given me some general misconceptions. For example, an example of a husband and wife where they get married, one was illegal, and they have children, where someone could still be deported even though they have a family in the United States. Can you just talk a little bit about kind of the misconceptions and things that you see?
Yes, people who just walk over the border, who have never been inspected by an immigration officer, they really can, it's almost impossible to legalize them. And if they would leave the United States and get in line, they would have to stay outside the United States for 10 years. And it doesn't matter whether they are married to a US citizen or whether they have US citizen children. For right now, they would have to leave the United States.
We see a lot of people that come to the United States to get educated in our colleges and universities, as well as some of our advanced degrees, law degrees, doctorates, etc. Those individuals that may come from China or India or Mexico or some other foreign country, do they have the ability to earn the right to be here permanently?
That really depends when they came. We have students who come usually on an F1 visa, but by the time they graduate and they are done with their studies, they usually have to leave. There are a few exceptions if they find an employer and they would qualify under the H-1B visas, they may apply for an H-1B visa. But that is also a problem because we have only 60,000 H-1B visas for people who have a bachelor's degree or higher. And then we have another 20,000 visas for PhDs and master degrees. And you can only apply in April. It is open, the application is open in April for the whole year. Usually it gets closed after 5 days because we have already 100,000 applications. And we have only 85,000 visas for these people. And then if they are approved, they can start in October. This cap does not apply for any of these visas if they go into with higher educational institutions, universities or so. They don't have a cap. They can apply anytime.
From a layperson's view, looking at the whole immigration issue, it seems to be a bit of a mess the way it's happening. It's kind of hard to keep up with. So I'm just curious, you and your husband came, and I assume you got a work visa, came 30-something years ago?
Correct. Yes.
Had you come today, would it have been difficult for you all, as it is for so many others
Probably
today?
not, because my husband worked for a university, and since there is no cap, all you have to show is that you are unique in your field, that you have a certain expertise which cannot be fulfilled by a U.S. citizen who is already in the country.
Talk to me for a minute about grounds of deportation. There are certain grounds where somebody can be deported. Is that fair?
Yes. As I said, if you entered the U.S. illegally and you have, let's say, you have nobody in the United States, then you are deportable. Also, if you overstayed your visa and you work, you are deportable. If you commit any crime, mostly felonies are deportable, or if you commit for example, any theft crime, which is very complicated, and most lawyers even don't know that. If you have a misdemeanor for a theft crime, where the actual sentence cannot be more than, or the sentence cannot be more than 1 year, but the actual sentence you get is less than 180 days, you are fine. If it's more than 180 days, that makes it an aggravated felony for immigration purposes.
Really?
Yes.
Talk to me about about the amnesty program that you mentioned that was back in 2000. What was that for?
That was something when it expired on April 30th, 2001. If somebody would have applied for you, let's say you were a child, your parent came, but you were on your parents' application already for, and that application would have been approvable. Then this child can use this application later on when this child grows up and is an adult but entered illegally. They can use this application, which happened before April 30th, 2001, to apply for an amnesty. They pay another $1,000 fine for it, and then they can be made legal.
Let's talk for a minute. It sounds like you were mentioning earlier, more complicated than the IRS code. It sounds like that. Let's take some simple examples, though. Let's assume that you have a husband and wife that both illegally entered the United States, and they have a child in the United States. What is the right of that child as the child grows up? Is the child a U.S. citizen because it was born on the United States soil, or how does that work?
Yes, the child is a U.S. citizen, but the parents cannot derive any benefits from that child until the child is 21 years of age. So the anchor babies really do not exist, because what do you know where you are in 21 years? For that period of 21 years, you cannot get any benefits through your child. So you are deportable for 21 years, and then your child can apply for you as soon as the child becomes an adult. But then also a 10-year bar applies.
All right, we have to take a quick break, our second break of the evening. When we come back, our final segment. We'd love to have you be a part. Call, text, email. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Greg Foster with the law firm of Hollis Wright. Whether you're buying a car or placing a loved one in a nursing home, there are many types of contracts that include arbitration agreements. But these sometimes can be confusing, and are you even required to sign it? In this week's Legal 411, we're answering the question, what is an arbitration agreement? Arbitration is a way of resolving a dispute. Instead of going to court, you go to arbitration. In legal terms, it's known as a forum selection clause. That means you select where the dispute will be heard. Traditionally, most people prefer the courtroom as the place for their dispute to be heard. That's because a judge oversees the dispute, and this judge is elected by popular vote. plus a jury of 12 members of your community decides the facts of the case. They hear the testimony and see the evidence before making a judgment. On the other hand, arbitration has 1 to 3 arbitrators who will decide the fate of the case. These arbitrators are not elected, but are instead hand-picked. If the parties cannot mutually agree on an arbitrator, the arbitrator may be selected from a pool of people who may have worked in the same industry as the individual or company who injured or caused harm to you. And there is no jury. So before you sign an arbitration agreement, here are the 5 steps you need to take. First, read all documents thoroughly. If you don't agree, don't sign anything. If you don't understand, consult an attorney. If the business tells you that you must sign an arbitration agreement to purchase a product or receive a service, don't do business with them or indicate on the document that you signed it, quote, under duress, or write, quote, I was forced to sign. Particularly in a nursing home setting, indicate on the document that you were, quote, told to sign the document so that your loved one would receive treatment and care. Listen, if you sign an arbitration agreement, you give up your 7th Amendment right to trial by jury under the United States Constitution, as well as your right to a jury in the state of Alabama. In other words, when you sign an arbitration agreement, you waive your rights as an American citizen. So it's up to you. Do you want your case to be heard by 12 members of your community or some employees of the industry that might have caused harm to your loved one? Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer the questions on the real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into the attorneys. Our final segment, just a few minutes remaining. Call, text, email. If you want to get your question to us, do it real quick. Josh?
I just saw the firm fact there, Dagmar, about temporary protection. Is that part of the executive order that was involved with the president? I mean, how does that work?
No, the temporary protective order we have already for many states. We have it for Nicaragua and Honduras, and now we have it for Yemen, and we're talking about Syria. And this gives you only a 2-year reprieve. You don't have to leave the United States for the next 2 years if you apply for temporary protective status. If it doesn't get extended, then you have to leave after 2 years.
I want to talk for a second about we hear all these politicians talk about immigration and building a wall and all these other things. There's some 10 to 15 million immigrants illegally in the United States, as I understand the statistics. Is there an answer?
But I think most of them are already integrated. Most of them pay taxes. They even pay in on fake Social Security numbers, and they can never collect on their payments. So, and when we say they take away jobs for American citizens, but for all purposes, they are here 10, 15, 20 years already, and they are integrated into the United States. All what is missing is really the piece of paper, but otherwise they are like you and I. Mm-hmm. And they pay, they care for their families, they pay for their children, they pay for their housing. Many have built small businesses. And when you think about it, when we take the breadwinner away, since the children are U.S. citizens, we have to pick up the tab. The taxpayer has to pay then for the children if you deport the breadwinner.
But it's so politicized, it's probably not going to be dealt with in the next year, I wouldn't think, not during an election year. agree, disagree?
Probably not. Yeah. And when you think about it, George W. Bush has tried it with Kennedy together to get immigration reform, and it didn't happen. Ted Kennedy died before it ever came to fruition. And then Obama tried to, he promised he would do something. He did an executive order, which right now is blocked in court. That was for parents from U.S. citizen children. So the children at least could be sure when they return from school and they are 6, 7, 8 years old, they would still find their parents. I think it is a terrible threat for a child to not knowing whether when they return from school, whether their parent will still be there.
Right. Let's talk about individuals that are U.S. citizens, leave the country for a period of time, vacation, second homes, etc. Do they have requirements to come back to the United States?
No, the U.S. citizens don't.
Okay.
You can stay outside the country and do whatever you want to do as long as it is not something illegal. But a green card holder, a legal permanent resident, they cannot leave the United States for a longer period than 180 days. And then they have to return to the United States. If they stay outside longer than that, at least a year or so, then they would be considered maybe abandoning their green card.
Where do you see?
We just have a couple of minutes remaining, and I want to give both of you guys opportunity, just a final thought from you. And Dagmar, if we have you do that first, just a final thought for our viewers.
I think in the long run we don't have a choice but to have another amnesty like we had under Reagan, because most of these people are integrated, most of these people have already families and have children over here, and it doesn't make any sense to deport them now and then have the adult children bring their parents back again into the United States.
Okay.
You know, I think if there's somebody that is a viewer that has questions about whether or not they can secure U.S. citizenship, whether a work visa would be applicable to them, whether they could be deported, it's a good idea to contact somebody that understands what they're doing. And Dagmar is a perfect example of that, a person that can answer questions, can give consultation, and can do so confidentially to allow people to understand what their rights are. So, you know, I believe when you bring folks like this on, people should use that to their advantage. If they have questions, they can call, text, or email. We can get them answers, and Dagmar will answer those questions to help provide and educate information to the community to understand really what their rights are.
A hot button issue right now that's very complicated, so we really appreciate you being on, and thanks, Josh, for doing a show on this.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us as well as we wrap things up. Here's how you can get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright. Also find them on Facebook as well as Twitter. As always, we really appreciate you being with us and hope you'll join us next week right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.